We are back with OMGPuppies, here to do another Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest video. I'm going to get 5 more cards, and hopefully we can expound on my knowledge in the past couple times and get these ones right. We're going to do 5 cards again, and you're the expert. You're like one of the best in the world, or so I've heard, at MTG Puzzle Quests. So you got to give me a run for your money.
Yeah, I think you may have gotten a somewhat exaggerated. I'm much better at Legacy than I am at Standard, but yeah. Basically, some people have gotten an exaggerated idea of how good I was because there was this podcast about it that often featured me, like prominently described what I was doing. Largely, I think just because they thought the name was funny. And I think a lot of people have gotten a sort of exaggerated idea of how good I was.
Okay, well,
I'm a pretty good player, but
Well, the really good player would also say exactly what you said. So who knows how good you are, you know? Well, let's go ahead and...
I mean, I'm not like Black Dragon or somebody.
Is that a different player?
Black Dragon Black Dragon is a very good player. Yeah.
So you go head to head, you win like 1 out of 10.
Never actually played against him. See, it's kind of hard to say because you don't normally play directly against other players. You play against the computer.
Oh yeah, you do. Okay. So who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be like an ELO system at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Okay, so the first card is a card I haven't heard about in Magic. I don't even know if it's a real card in Magic, but it is here in MTG Puzzle Quest. It is a real card. Okay, this is a 7 mana. Oh, first of all, before I get started, I should say that if you want to familiarize yourself, you're watching this one with the general rules of how this game is played, how attacks and blocks work, how artifacts, enchantments, and things work in more detail. Go ahead and check out the first video in this series as well. And then the second video will catch you up a little bit more about how upgrades of gems work and everything. And then we'll do a little bit less talk of that in this video. So if you do want to brush up on that, go watch the first one. This one is Defang, 7 mana, spell card Aura. Target opposing creature's base power becomes 0 until end of turn. If that is a vampire card, your creatures gain vigilance and protection from black and red.
Now, I should explain, those keywords do not mean the same thing they mean in paper Magic.
I figured.
Yeah, vigilance. So most creatures in this game cannot block. Vigilance means that they can block, they will block, but only if they would survive the fight. They won't sacrifice themselves to protect you, basically.
Okay. And protection, how does that work in this game?
Okay, protection. If a creature has protection, I'll read you the exact reminder text. Whenever this creature would take damage from a source of that color, it takes only half of that damage rounded up. And while your opponent controls a creature of the specified color, this creature gains hexproof.
Wow. Okay, that's much different. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Gaining hexproof with protection is when you have something of a different color on your board is kind of something I don't think that Magic has ever done in paper, but it seems pretty cool in this game. 7 mana is not a ton of mana from what I remember. Let's see, it's an aura to give opposing creatures base power 0 till end of turn only. And you only get vigilance and protection from black and red if that creature is a vampire. So there's no sideboard in this game from what I remember, correct?
Well, so there's no sideboard in the strict sense. Now, if you're doing a PvE fight, then you kind of have a turbo side where you know ahead of time exactly what they're playing. You can structure your entire deck specifically to counter them. If you're playing a PvP against another, human player, you don't know what they're playing, but you see what planeswalker they have, and that'll often give you a strong indication of what kind of deck they're playing. For instance, if they're playing Liliana of the Veil, there's going to be a lot of discard and mill. If they're playing Raw, it's probably a spell-heavy deck, and so forth.
Okay, that makes sense. I would say that we already in the first video went over a card called Sleep with the Fishes, and that was also an aura, and it put on their creature, and it lost all abilities, and it became a 1/1 from what I remember. Is that correct?
No, it didn't become a 1/1. It was disabled, which means it can't attack, it can't block, and it has no abilities.
Okay, can't attack, can't block, has no abilities. So, making a creature's base power 0, and it keeps the abilities, And the vampire clause is probably really good if it's a vampire, but like realistically, how many vampires are there? I can see this card being good if one of the like premier aggressive threats is a vampire, and you're also playing, and they're also playing. Correct me if I'm wrong. From what I remember, the color, if they control a color, or if you control a color, it's hexproof.
If they control a creature of that color.
If they control a creature of that
Either
color,
of the colors. Then all your creatures are hexproof.
Your creatures are hexproof. Okay.
Yeah.
Whereas the vigilance and protection from black and red with the hexproof and taking half damage is probably very good if you can guarantee that your opponent has a vampire. But I can't see this card being very good if your opponent doesn't have a vampire. Putting something base power 0, if there was a bunch of vanillas in this game that it's like, oh, I'm a 9 mana, 15 power creature. Like maybe putting that to 0 is fine. But wouldn't sleep with the fishes just be a better card at that point? I'm going to say that Defang is not good, and I'm going to be very surprised when you say it's good. But I'm going to say it's not good.
Sleep with the fishes didn't exist when this came out, but yeah, you're right. Yeah, you are a smart guy. I don't care what anyone else says. This is legendarily one of the worst cards ever printed.
Yeah, it seems pretty bad.
It has acquired a sort of mimetic. It has acquired a sort of mimetic status, sort of like One with Nothing in Paper Magic, as the worst card ever printed. I don't actually think that's literally true that it's the worst card, but it might be the worst masterpiece. See, there's five rarities in this game: common, uncommon, rare, mythic, masterpiece. This is masterpiece, which is the highest. Now, so a big part of the problem with this, as you said, it's only becomes 0 until end of turn. If it became 0 permanently, that would be very good. But it only becomes 0 until end of turn. And this is sorcery. So it can't even make it 0 when you want it to be 0, which is on their turn.
Right.
And most creatures in this game can't block, as mentioned. So that's which is really the only time when you care if your opponent's creatures have power on your turn.
Mm-hmm.
Off the top of my head, I can only think of one vampire that can block. There's probably others I'm not thinking of, but there's very little overlap between those two things. Yeah, this is awful. And just to give you an idea of how awful it is, as I mentioned, this is a masterpiece, which is the highest rarity. And the same set, same color, had this card at common.
9 mana, Sigarda's Imprisonment. Target opposing creature can't attack and can't block. That creature gains enchanted when this creature dies.
You don't have to read the rest of it.
You don't have to read the rest of it.
All that matters is that first line.
Okay,
is that first line.
Creature can't attack or block.
This is a common. Yeah, and that's permanent at common. And this, I mean, it's 2 mana more, but still.
Yeah, but still, it's like they can't attack forever.
Right, exactly. And it can't block.
Yeah,
you would much rather just...
You'd much rather just have this.
Yeah, you would much rather... and this isn't even like... White has plenty of removal. Has plenty of spot removal. You don't need to settle for this extremely conditional pseudo removal.
Yep, for sure.
Okay, next card. We talked about this a bit last time, but I want to show you the actual card, and here is the same card flipped, so you can see the optical illusion.
Yep. This card is a card in Magic as well, and it's also called Ambiguity, which is funny. And this one is
it's an uncard.
The uncard, yep. This is a 9 mana. What does that E mean again?
It's sort of like being a foil.
Okay, and what's the bubble on the bottom left?
That means that this is a card that can create time bubbles, and it will explain how in the rules text.
Okay, when this support enters the board, create a time bubble token. When a time bubble token is destroyed, deny 3 gems. Okay, and that counts as being as the gems being denied gems, which is like the blue and black one.
Yeah, the blue one. Yeah,
the blue one. Okay, then the first opposing creature gets -X -X. X is the number of denial gems on the board. Interesting. Okay, so what's the... Oh, you just flipped it over. Okay. But
yeah,
it's not a different effect. It's just...
No. This is just so that people can see the optical illusion.
Okay, true. Okay, so what do I think about this card? How does your opponent destroy a time bubble?
If they match it, the time bubble is essentially a support. A blue gem will be marked as a time bubble. And it's not just when your opponent destroys it; when either of you destroy it, this happens. And so when it gets matched, it gets destroyed.
Okay, so you're paying 9 mana for the support card. It goes on the board, and it creates a time bubble, and then you're incentivized to destroy the time bubble. You deny 3 gems from your opponent, and that says like counter a spell or mill them or something like that.
Yeah.
The denied gems.
When a denied support is created, your opponent gains the denied status. When a player with the denied status matches a denied gem, they're restrained, which means all their non-blue mana bonuses get -1 until the end of their next turn. If you match a denied gem, it creates another time bubble. And a time bubble is if you match a time bubble token and destroy it, you drain 3 mana from your opponent. And if your opponent matches it, they discard it.
Interesting. And draining 3 mana from the opponent is kind of like making their next card more expensive, right?
You can make down payments on cards.
Mm-hmm.
You can pay, if you got like a 10 mana card, you can pay 5 mana this turn, 5 mana next turn.
Right.
So if this says, well, you've made your down payment. Well, no, you haven't. I've taken 3 mana of your down payment away. Now, if they don't have a down payment, if all of the cards have no mana, this has no effect on that. It only drains what you've already spent. Oh, and I should mention, when they discard, as I mentioned here, unlike most discards, you discard the first card with mana in their hand.
Oh, wow.
Meaning that it will only make you discard a card that they've paid mana into.
Interesting. This seems like kind of like a synergy card where like you have a bunch of denied gem shenanigans going on, the time bubble hurting them, making them discard a card, making you deny their mana, and then it can remove creatures, but a lot of creatures have more than 3 toughness. I know there's like an Obnixilis that you showed me that had 3 toughness.
Yeah.
Like the first opposing creature gets -X/-X, where X is the number of denial gems on the board.
Now, keep in mind that is a permanent -X/-X.
Okay. Yeah, it just gets -X/-X. Like it can kill stuff, but like it's also probably just going to shrink something. Or X is the number of denial gems on the board. So it's the first opposing creature gets -3/-3 basically. So you're not like really going to use this as a removal spell because it's not like in my competitive brain, like it's not consistently a removal spell enough. You'd only want to use this card if you can really utilize time bubbles and denied gems and deny status. And I'm pretty sure like if you're building a deck around this can't be like the best denied gem like payoff. Maybe you play it in the deck because your whole deck revolves around denied gems, but like I can't see that being like really good. So I'm going to say that this card's not good.
Okay, this fucking card. This is the Lantern of Insight of MTGPQ, or if you prefer the Yu-Gi-Oh reference, this is the Mystic Mind of MTGPQ.
Really?
This is the card that comes down and says, you don't get to play the game anymore.
Really?
Or maybe Lantern of Insight isn't the best analogy. Maybe it's more like the rack because of how much discard. The -X/-X doesn't matter. The discard is what matters.
Interesting.
And so, I mean, yes, you're right. You don't just put this in any normal deck. You put this in a deck that is specifically built around denying and time bubble and so forth. So one of the key things that discarding the first card with mana from your hand is way better than just discarding.
Right.
Because you fill up the first cards in your hand with mana first. The decks are mostly built around filling, you're built on the assumption that you can have multiple turns to pay into a card to cast it. This will, since it always discards the first with mana from your hand, you realistically, unless you have a card that's cheap enough that you can cast it that you can get enough mana to cast it in a single turn, you will not be able to cast it at all. You'll discard it before you can do anything with it.
Oh, okay.
It only works because there is a critical mass of cards like this. And the thing is, yeah, you only discard if you match it, but you've already played a bunch of lands and so forth that convert gems. So before you even get to do anything, you're going to get a bunch of matches that you can't control. My record against this card is actually probably worse than it should be, just because when I see it, I go on tilt. It's That's another way in which it's that's another way in which it's like Mystic Mine or Lantern of Insight, in that it's a card that tends to overperform because people go on tilt when they see it.
Yeah, fair. I didn't know how I alluded to it being good if denied and time bubbles were good, but like I didn't know how good those things were.
Yeah.
But if there are a critical mass of those cards, then like this card's like probably like the cog in the wheel, like the Mystic Mine and the Lantern of Insight.
Yeah, the best way to do denying and time bubble and all that is actually not on a card. It's a Planeswalker effect. On the Planeswalker, it's Fairy Chronoclast, which I refuse to play that Planeswalker because I have a conscience, but
fair enough. So I think I am I think I'm 1-1 so far. So let's see if I can redeem myself.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Curse of Vitality. This is a 9-mana 4 block. Is that that's what you call it in this game as well?
4 shield.
Shield. I feel like I called it block in the last video too. 4 shield.
I think you did, yeah.
Support card, enchantment, or a curse. When a creature you control attacks, gain 4 life for each creature and creature reinforcement you control, up to 60. 60 is the max life you can have? Or is this card limiting you to 60?
60 is the max life you can gain from this card. Your actual max life will depend on what Planeswalker you're playing. You do have max, like in Hearthstone. It's not uncapped like in Paper Magic. But your max life was usually somewhere between 100 and 130. People usually just call this COV or sometimes COV for short.
Okay, so are there creatures / cards / whatever in the game that like trigger off you gaining life? I know there is in Paper Magic, like where gain life, make a 1/1 put a 1/1 counter.
There are, yeah.
Interesting. I mean, it's a little bit of metagamey here, but if people have a nickname for a card, that means it's playable. They wouldn't have the nickname if it wasn't. So, but how good is it? Is the question. If people are calling this COV, like no one calls this card anything in Paper Magic because this card's not good because it's not playable. But if it was playable, they'd have nicknames like Dragon Rage Channeler. If that card wasn't playable, they wouldn't be calling it Darcy. But they call it Darcy or DRC because it's a good card.
I've never heard that one.
Yeah.
Darcy? Why Darcy?
DRC, Dragon Rage Channeler, Darcy.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yep. So that it's like a major hint that you may not have wanted to give me, but let's see. I mean, just based on that, I have to say this card's good, and if it's not and has a nickname, then that's gonna be a surprise to me. But also, this card is a higher rarity, right? On the bottom, is this card the higher rarity based on the highest rarity?
This is the highest rarity, yes. But remember that I earlier showed you one of the worst cards in the game, which is also that highest rarity.
Yeah, that is true. And
there's certainly plenty of mythics in Paper Magic that are terrible.
Oh, 100%. When a creature you control attacks, gain 4 life for each creature and creature reinforcement you control. Are creatures' reinforcements like things that give things vigilance, like things like that?
No, so reinforcements, remember when you play a creature that already exists, you reinforce rather than getting a new one? So it's like that. Or remember last time I showed you the one that created the 7
cats
tokens, which was effectively 7/7, but for this, that would count as 7 of them.
Interesting.
So they would give you 28 life.
Is there like a super aggro deck in this game? Like it's just like
there's always aggro.
Well, the only thing this deck wants to do is just kill you as fast as possible.
Oh, absolutely. Every format of I was gonna say every format of this game, but really every format of pretty much every card game has had something like that.
Yeah. I'm gonna say like if you're playing a control deck, or wait, is this card white? What color is this card?
It is white.
Okay.
This is white.
Okay. If you're playing a control deck, say you're playing like Esper, and then you're playing like Void Rend and things like that, and you don't want to die to aggro, this could be an important card in your deck. But you also have to have a creature that you control attacking, which makes it seem like it'd be like more of a mid-range thing and not a control thing. I'm thinking of my regular Magic the Gathering brain here.
Now, one thing I should mention is that in this game, you don't choose I mean, you choose obviously what cards to put in your deck and what creatures to play and so forth. But once a creature is on the battlefield, you don't choose whether or not to attack with it. During the attack step, every creature that can attack and has power greater than 0 will attack.
Really? Oh, and
Yeah.
that.
And creatures don't tap to attack. Creatures don't tap to attack.
They don't tap to attack because the vigilance keyword is different. Also, most creatures can't block, so it's like kind of like an auto battler
Right.
after you put the creatures in the battlefield.
Well, not exactly, because to some extent, yes, in the sense that what blocks what will be auto decided for you. But there are things that say like, whenever this creature attacks, do this to target creature. If you have a creature that says, whenever this attacks, deal 5 damage to target creature, and you would make that decision.
Right.
That sort of thing.
Interesting. Okay.
And of course, you also, if you have any instance, when your opponent attacks you, if you have any instance, you could cast them there. Or if you have creatures with flash, you can cast them.
Okay. I mean, everything in my Magic brain wants to say this card is awful. Well, you gave it a nickname. I mean, my official answer is I think this card is bad, but I would not be surprised since it's called Cov.
Yeah. Okay. So you kind of avoided my trap there. I specifically mentioned the nickname because I was hoping you would say, "Oh, well, it must be good if it has a nickname."
Oh,
and it's true that
okay.
you only give it was true that you only give nicknames to good cards, and you get so Curse of Vitality must be good because they have a nickname, except that wasn't this card. They nerfed it.
Oh, they nerfed it.
When this card first came out, it had a completely different effect. It said, whenever your opponent takes damage, you gain 4 life, which is completely different from what this card does. And that was broken because there were other cards that said,
when you take 4 life, they take damage.
Life, your opponent. Yeah. There were other cards. So it was a loop that would kill your opponent.
Yep.
And in fact, you remember earlier I mentioned there was only one vampire I could think of that could block.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that one sticks in my mind is because it was one of the cards that could be the other half of this combo.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's Veto, right? That's Veto.
That is... well, Veto could be the other half as well, but that was not the card I was thinking of.
Okay.
But...
so I didn't fall into your trap. I didn't fall into your trap of saying of the nickname. I almost did. I was so close to falling into it, but I was like, everything in me is saying this card's bad.
Yeah, what was it? Dusk Rose, the Dark Rose, something like that. Anyway, I was going to say something.
Veto. Veto of the Dusk Rose.
Yeah, Dusk Rose. Yeah, I couldn't remember the rest of the name. So what happened was a few months ago, the development of this game was handed off to a different team. And when they came in, it almost felt like, there's always people complaining. There was like a bunch of things people have been complaining out for a long time. They came in and it was like they made a list of those list of changes to make to the game. Mm-hmm. One thing they said is, well, there's a bunch of degenerate, combo decks we need to get rid of. This is supposed to be Magic Puzzle Quest, not Yu-Gi-Oh! Puzzle Quest.
Yeah.
So they nerfed this. They put in like some other cards. They had a bunch of things that say, hey, well, this effect can trigger no more than such and such number of times per turn. Prevent those things. They did a whole bunch of improvements to the UI. They also, this is something people have been asking for a long time. It used to be in events, they had a number of charges and they would slowly regenerate charges. So you had to keep going back in and they changed that. So now you just get all the charges up immediately when you start the event and you can distribute it however you want. You can do it all your games at once or, yeah. And of course, there's also, I like a lot of the changes they made. There's always there are people who don't, and there's long arguments about it because that's how the internet works. But
yeah, of course, everyone's going to argue about something. So yeah, I'm so glad I got this card right because I almost fell into the trap. You laid it out pretty perfectly for me though, too.
Yeah. Now for this next card, I should preface this by mentioning something, which is that I mentioned when you have a creature in play and you play another one, it reinforces rather than getting another copy.
Yes.
That does still trigger ETB effects.
Oh, interesting. Ooh, Spell Queller. Love this card. This is...
Wait, are these all... So far, I've only... Oh, no, so far, I've given you all... No, that's not true. Ambiguity was a mythic, but I was going to say I'd given you all masterpieces. But that's not the case.
Well, I'm okay with having all masterpieces because some masterpieces are terrible. You're saying, all right. So we have spell color. It's a 10 mana. It would be 1 white blue in Paper Magic, but this is 10 mana 2/3. It's still a 2/3 in Paper Magic. Creature Spirit. When this creature enters the battlefield, disable the opposing card with the highest base cost. Okay.
So what that means is that can be either a support or a creature.
Opposing because it says opposing card.
Yeah, and the name can be a little misleading to a Magic player because normally when you talk about cards in Paper Magic, that means the things in the hand, but no, they mean the actual creatures and supports in play.
Okay. Yeah, I did get that it meant cards in play with that. But I can see how it could have tripped me up. When this creature dies, you may create a copy of a random opposing disabled non-token card in play under your control. Wow.
And it does have flying, as you can see with the little picture of wings in the bottom left.
Okay, I do see that. When it dies, you may create a copy of a random opposing disabled non-token card into play under your control. The thing is, I think this card's easy to die because 2/3 is basically a 1/1 in this game. It is a 2/3 in real life, but 2/3 is, as far as attacking and blocking, matters much more than in this game, especially when 2/3 is a pretty low number in this game. It is blue and white. You can fit into a lot of decks. Disabling cards is pretty good. Disabling the one with the highest base cost is pretty good because it doesn't randomly choose one and you choose the wrong one. Sometimes you might not want to do the highest base cost if they have a combo piece that's not the highest card on the board. So in that way, it's a little bit limiting. But the death trigger of Spell Queller in Paper Magic lets your opponent have a benefit of casting the card for free. The death trigger with this one is that you actually get a benefit of creating a random opposing disabled non-token card into play under your control. Does it stay disabled under your control? Or, is it a copy of it also being disabled?
No, the one you cast is not disabled.
Interesting. Just disabling and then making a copy of your opponent's card? That just seems really good. Oh, man. Well, disabling something is good, because then it can't attack or block, right? Disabling?
It can't attack, it can't block, it has no abilities.
It has no abilities. It does the sleep with the fishes thing. Now, this doesn't have splash, which it does in Paper. But you're not countering spells with this. You're disabling your opponent's things with this. A creature that disables your opponent's things is pretty good. When the creature dies, that will only trigger once, because no matter how many times you reinforce this, the creature will only die once. All the copies will die. But you can keep, if you have a Spell Queller, get rid of their, disable their highest thing, and you reinforce it, does it disable their next thing too, or does the other one become undisabled?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
You have a Spell Queller, you put it on their card, it disables it. And then if you reinforce it, trigger it, put it on a different card because they have a higher mana value card at this point in the game, then does it disable the other thing instead, or does it disable it as well?
No, the first thing will remain disabled.
Okay. Gosh. I think disabling things is good. And I think the death trigger of this card is really good. The fact that you get ETBs and what you said off of getting additional Spell Quellers in play. The stats are pretty bad, but you wouldn't play this for the stats. You would play this for the disables. It would just depend on if in the blue and white colors there are better cards to disable with. But I'm going to say this card's good.
This card is almost really good. It's one word away from being really good.
Flash.
And that word is enabled. No, that word is enabled.
Enabled.
So if it said disable the enabled opposing card with the highest base cost, that would be fantastic. But it doesn't, which means that usually when you play it, you've disabled the card, it comes down, it's just going to re-disable the card that's already disabled because it's still the one that has the highest base cost. So you're essentially wasting that.
Oh, I was thinking you would only play another copy of Spell Queller if your opponent has something with higher mana value.
Yeah, no, you can make that decision, of course, but it would be so much better if you could just come in and it would just eventually, as you play these, disable every card they had, which you can't do.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. The creating a copy of a random opposing thing to play under your control, I mean, it's not nothing, but generally cards that let you play with your opponent's cards aren't great. If you wanted your deck is going to be highly themed to work toward one specific end. Remember that you only have 10 deck slots, so your deck is going to be extremely tightly focused. So your opponent's cards aren't really that great for you. Like if you got like an empty creature spot, and you might get one of your opponent's creatures and it's better than nothing, but it's not really that great.
So you
play. It looks so much better than it is.
You play like if you have one empty creature spot, you just play Quasar over this.
Sure. Well, no, probably not. Probably not Quasar, because Quasar was only good in Standard, and this is a Legacy card.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah. And
so it's like a tool that you can play that like can be good, but like usually it's just not played.
Yeah. Okay. This is the final one. This is a support card.
All right. This is for all the marbles here. This is if I go 3 and 2 or 2 and 3. Okay. So I'm gonna have to put some extra effort into this one, and I do know what this card does in paper, so that's pretty cool. Is there anything you have to tell me before I start reading this one?
Yeah. The two icons in the bottom left.
Yeah.
Mean that it's resilient, which means that
indestructible.
Normally, you can destroy supports by matching the gem that they're on.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, that is basically not going to happen. Realistically, they're only going to destroy it if they have a card that says, destroy a support.
Okay, so it's like pseudo indestructible.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what does the other symbol mean?
That means it has kicker. And the 9 means that it's kicker for 9. And you'll see what it does when you read the text.
Skyclave Relic does have kicker. And it is also indestructible in paper. So I get the gist of what this card does in paper. It was a mildly, before I read this card, it was a mildly playable mana rock that usually no one ever played. Unless they're playing a big mana deck, maybe they play a couple Skyclave Relics in there. Okay.
Oh. And something else I should mention. So this card, as you can see by the color behind the 9, is currently in Legacy, but I want you to evaluate it for how it was in Standard.
Okay, and so not Legacy. Okay, cool.
Right.
This is a 2... I'm going to say this wrong again. This is a 2... I want to say toughness, but it's not toughness. Okay, Shield.
And
Shield.
The way to remember that is the little icon looks like a shield.
It does kind of look like a shield, but somehow I'm not even getting that. Okay. Support card, artifact. This support can't be reinforced. Okay. All right. Activate.
So,
go ahead.
That may not mean quite what you think it means. Normally, as mentioned, when you play a support and you play another one, it reinforces, meaning it adds the thing. In this one, you can still play the second one, but instead of reinforcing, it'll create a separate copy.
Oh, okay. Got it. All right. Activate 2. Convert 2 gems to your Planeswalker's colors. Interesting. Okay.
So what that means is, activate 2, what that means is when this comes into play, 2 gems are selected and they'll get little outlines around them so you can see which ones they are. And nothing happens if your opponent matches them, but if you match them, then that effect happens, the convert 2 gems. And at the beginning of your turn, if there aren't those 2 gems, you or your opponent have matched one, it'll bring back up to that.
Okay.
So let's say you match one of your gems, then on your next turn, another gem will choose, so you again have 2 gems that are like this, 2 activated gems.
It will activate 2. It'll activate 2 gems no matter what at the start of your turn, basically.
Yeah, but if you already have some, it won't add to that. It'll just keep the ones you already have.
Okay, so activate up to 2. And like the ceiling is 2. Okay, got it. Kicker 9, and it's 9 mana, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, and because this one, you can have multiple copies, each one of those copies will have a separate 2.
Okay, perfect. All right, kicker 9. So I'm assuming that it's going to make extra copies of Skyclave Relic with the kicker, but I haven't even read it yet. The kicker 9 is you pay 9 more mana?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's while you're casting this, right?
Sort of. The way the UI works for it is a little weird, but essentially, yes. So that would bring the cost of this card up to a total of 18.
Okay. Can you bank mana for the kicker, or no?
Yes, essentially. Yes, you can.
So you can bank 9, and then you can keep banking, bank 12, bank 15, or whatever, and then then cast this for kicker?
Yeah. Yes, you could. You can't. You have to pay it all at once.
Right, of
You
course.
you have to have the 18 ready when you cast it. But
okay, cool. All right, when you cast this card, create 2 copies of Skyclave Relic on the board under your control. Okay, it does the same thing it does the same thing as it does in paper, like for the most part. Skyclave Relic was not a very good card in paper. The fact that you can play this in any deck, right? Because it's a colorless artifact. It lets you play 3 color decks more reliably. In standard, I don't know. The mana rocks that are the only really playable mana rock. There's been a few playable mana rocks in standard over the past couple of years. A couple of them have been just 2 mana. 2 mana. This enters play like the Iron Crag, I think it's called. And then there's another one that it enters tap, but it can tap for any color. And then it was like a snow one. And the other one is still in standard. It's the one for legendaries. It's called Relic of Legends. That lets you tap legendaries to add mana, and also it adds any color of mana itself, which is a very good card. Skyclave Relic, when it was in standard, I believe it was like Kaldheim or something. This card saw very, very fringe play. But the way that mana rocks work in Puzzle Quest is way different than how mana rocks work in regular paper. Even though it does a very, very similar, if not almost exact same thing, effect as it did in paper. It being 6 more mana is like largely irrelevant. Banking 18 mana is a lot of mana, and like isn't like Omniscience 18 mana or like 16 mana or something like that.
Omniscience is 17.
17 mana. So in order to be actually casting
Vindicator is 18.
Vindicator is 18. Okay, so in order to be actually doing this and getting value, you would need to getting value up to 18. You would need to play like really, really expensive cards in your deck, and your deck only having 10. Your deck only having 10. Your deck only having 10 cards in it makes it like a really weird dynamic.
Well, it only has 10 unique cards. You have infinite copies of each card in your deck.
Oh, infinite of each?
So it's not like you're going to deck yourself. Yeah, well, so the way it works is your deck is guaranteed, in your first 40 cards of your deck is guaranteed to have exactly 4 copies of each card. The next 40 cards is also guaranteed to have exactly 4 copies, and so forth. So you have infinite, and it's sort of semi-random, but it's a bit more uniform than it would be if it were truly random.
Interesting. Wow. 3 videos later, I still didn't even know that. That's crazy. Okay. Let's see. How good do I think having multiple of these in play are? Interesting. Say I play 4 of this in my deck. On average in a game, games last how many turns usually? It varies between decks.
It varies a lot. It also varies if a PvE game will generally last longer than a PvP game because your AI opponent will have higher health than a human opponent will.
Okay. Converting gems is way different than just adding mana. Let's say you have 6 to 8 gems that are activated from a bunch of copies of Skyclave Relic. And you're playing like a 3-color deck. It does make your stuff easier, but it also makes you able to convert 2 gems to your Planeswalker's colors. Do you get to choose what colors those are?
No.
Okay. So say you're playing say you just wait. Okay, instead of playing this in a 3-color deck, what if you played this in like a 1-color, like a monocolor deck, and you played this? And then all of your gems are 1 color. You just get like auto matches like every turn. Like you just get auto cascading of gems. Like because you have like 6 Planeswalker's colors and you just amass way more mana than your opponent. I mean, that is probably the situation where I would think it's really good. Instinctively, I was like, you would want different colors of your Planeswalker's colors, and maybe that's an application of this card. Because if you play like a 3-color deck, if you play a monocolor deck and you can just cascade a bunch of gems over and over and over again and just have way more mana than your opponent, that also seems pretty good. Maybe I'm thinking about this wrong, but maybe in a monocolor deck, this card would be like absurd. I'm going to say this card was good in standard.
Yeah, I'm impressed. You worked that out really well. You're right that it's much better in a monocolor deck. And one thing that I put this in that I thought might trip you up, but it didn't. So in Magic, obviously any cards you would prefer to cost less than more, but specifically for ramp, you would prefer that they, got a 6 mana ramp card. Well, people look and say, "What's the point? I'm already at 6." Yeah. But in this game, because you can make down payments, that's much less of a factor. Like even if you're only getting 5 mana is sort of like getting, if you're only getting 5 a turn or 6 a turn,
Right.
well, you can save it up in 3 turns. You can play this thing. It's not like you have to be at 18 to play it.
Exactly.
So that's much less of a factor. Yeah. Now in Legacy, this sees no play. It's just too slow for Legacy.
Yeah.
And there's just much better things.
So you did play, you would play this in a monocolored deck in Standard, and it was good?
Yeah.
Let's go! How did I get that? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. This was actually one that I put in because I couldn't. This came in shortly after I first started playing the game, and I got it wrong. I wasn't really familiar with the game that much at first. And I saw there was this YouTube creator who was talking about how great it was. And I was like looking at it like, what are you talking about? I need to be, once I reach 18, I can finally start rapping. What are you talking about? And you're like, no. And then it took me a long time to realize, no, this guy was right. This is a good card.
And it is because like you get just a tremendous more amount of mana than your opponent because all your gems are the same. So you're just always matching.
Oh yeah. You can get. Interestingly, you would not want this to be your only source of gem conversion. You want to have some automatic, like lands or something, to help trigger those cascades.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can get absurd. You can get absurd, and because it doesn't reinforce. It's not even just you pay 18, you get 3 of them now. You can pay another 18 and get a total of 6 of them. And
yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, what if like half the whole board is full of these activated gems? Then don't you just win the game? Like,
yeah. I mean, it's not quite that simple, but yeah,
it's not as simple. Yeah, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I mean, the 2 basic resources in this game, as in Paper Magic, are mana and cards. If you look at like a list of the top 100 most broken cards in Magic ever, I bet like 45 of them would be ways to get stupid amounts of mana. 45 would be ways to get stupid amounts of cards, and the other 10 would be some random nonsense.
Random combo nonsense.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, like I bet like 90% of them would be ways to either get huge amounts of mana or huge amounts of cards.
Wow. I'm impressed with myself on Skyclave Relic, but also
that was impressive.
Going 3 and 2 is what I wanted. Okay, so getting 60% is passing in this game, but huge thank you to you, OMGPuppies, for giving these MTG Puzzle Quest cards. I would have never heard of this game if it wasn't for you. If you listening out there right now do want to be on the show, just like OMGPuppies, you can join the Patreon down below, patreon.com/TheOneJame, in order to get your place in a video. Also, there's a bunch of different tiers as well. There's even higher tiers than that. And you can get up to 1 video a month, even more videos a month if you do want to. Anyway, as always, you can go to CoolStuffInc.com and use code JAME5 at checkout. That's JAME5 to get 5% off of anything in the store. Thank you very much for hanging out once again. Let me know if you any other games or any other things that you like of these videos down in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. And as always, peace.